Hello and welcome to the Exit Velo podcast. It is episode 65 already somehow. That is crazy. It's a crazy world we live in these days, but we're going to keep giving you all the baseball news we can. And there certainly was a lot of it to break down this week, Ben. Not all good news. There is a little bit of sad news I know we're going to lead with. But before we get into that, how are you doing? How was your week, man?
Week's going well, yeah. I mean, I had obviously this is as we think the kind of the quiet moment for baseball still, but just seeing like the free agent signings, giving hope and stuff, and the announcement last week that about baseball season looking like it's starting to resume, and I mean that combined with getting some great hockey and football to kind of tie me over during this. Thought the baseball season has really helped me get through this week pretty well. Yeah.
This really is an awesome time of the year sports wise. You got MLB just close to getting ready. You still got the free agent news to hold us over. You got college basketball, NBA, football's in the playoffs, hockey starting up too. It's a sport lover's dream. And at Back Sports Page, we're covering just about all of them. So check out the site, check out the other podcast. But tonight we are talking baseball, and how could we not lead with the passing of legendary Hank Aaron, one of the very greatest players to ever play the game. He passed away at age 86 this morning. Aaron was a Hall of Famer. He famously broke Babe Ruth's more than half a century old home run record, clubbing 755 long balls in his illustrious career. He's the all-time RBI king. He was a barrier breaker. One of the Ben and I were talking a little bit before the pre-show. He was one of the very earliest and most successful, I should say, black athletes in the game. And definitely, he wasn't around as early as Jackie Robinson, but a barrier breaker in his own right, and a huge, huge legacy. And he will be sorely missed. Ben, what was your impressions of hearing Hank Aaron passing?
When I found out the news that we lost Hank Aaron this morning, it just felt like a big piece of the game died and went silent. Like it's almost like a year of the anniversary since like the NBA lost Kobe Bryant, and now I kind of feel the pain that like these diehard NBA fanatics we're going through to lose like a face of the game, because Hank Aaron was obviously a great face of the game of baseball. His number 44 will forever live as an iconic number from now on, and it was just a big loss to have to cope with. I mean, the way he revolutionized the game, not only, I mean, all his stats that we'll go over, those speak for themselves, but besides his stats, just his humble spirit that he brought to the game, and how he was always, how it just wasn't about him and his openness and just his class as a great guy to the game of baseball, making him a great ambassador, is another big part of this game that we lost today when we lost Hank Aaron.
And for all the on-field accolades too, he's certainly an amazing man off the field as well. He was a humanitarian, did so much for the community. He was actually awarded the 2002 Presidential Medal of Freedom. He was a role model. He was larger than life. And as you said too, Ben, just so humble especially for a guy who's one of the very greatest hitters ever in the game. And it's not an easy thing to hit a baseball. You couldn't fault a guy like that for being a bit boastful, but by all accounts, that really wasn't Hank Aaron. He was, a down-to-earth guy, a humble man, and just an amazing competitor. And the game is definitely going to miss him moving forward. And on a personal note, I've always loved him, looked up to him. I'm actually in part named after him. My middle name is Aaron, so I'm Henry Aaron Winklehake. So always loved him for that reason too, and never could quite hit like him or really anywhere close at all. But he was a role model for me, somebody who I would try to swing for the fences like, and just very sad to see his passing, but fortunate that we got him for the 86 wonderful years that we did.
Absolutely, and just all the great seasons we got him for. I mean, arguably, his thing was so revolutionary in sport. Everyone says, "Oh, Babe Ruth was the first great athlete in any sport." But I gotta say, Hank Aaron, kind of broke through as like one of the first great. He really showed that like no matter the color of your skin, you could be a dominant in the sport. He's kind of one of the come to think of it, he's kind of one of the first athletes to really display that. I mean, I know Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier before him, but then once Hank Aaron got in the league, it was around the same time that like the same era that like Muhammad Ali, as well as Bill Russell were like in like the height of their popularity, and they were starting to prove that. But so I think Hank Aaron is one of those core athletes who really did that. Was one of the first like athletes of color to really gain a lot of appreciation. That's really been important for the game of baseball and its legacy and everything. And I mean everything about the guy, it's like almost what's there not to like. And then the thing about Hank Aaron that like, I mean, there's just so much to say. I'm kind of lost for my words here, but like just looking at his stats, he hit everyone knows him as like the great home run hitter he was 755 home runs. I would still argue he is that greatest home run hitter. I mean, I know there's the debate with Bonds and the steroids, but I have to still give it to Aaron with his home run record. But besides that, if you look at a lot of his other stats, he could hit for average, a 305 lifetime average. Anyone who bats above 300, that is considered a great career accomplishment. 624 doubles, 2,297 RBIs, which is still a record he holds, and then 240 stolen bases. He could also field really well. He had a cannon of an arm from right field. He holds the record for the most all-star games at 25, and he currently also holds the most records, like overall records in the league too. And I mean, he's also the thing that's amazing about his athleticism and stature is he's not your regular home run hitter. That's the thing that in terms of he doesn't have the stature of your every regular home run hitter, which like really impresses me, should impress a lot of people. At 6 feet, 180 pounds, it didn't have to be all about body mass to have that great home run power he did. He was just able to all do it in his hands, to some of the best quick swinging hands I've ever seen of any player, and strength in his hands, breaking down that everything he did for the game of baseball. I mean, if there's like that baseball Mount Rushmore, I mean, Hank Aaron is kind of, I could just see Hank Aaron's face as one of the first ones there.
It has to be. You took the words out of my mouth too. I was going to say any Mount Rushmore of baseball, sir, it has to include Hank Aaron at this point. And the stats you mentioned, they just jump off the page at you, that he's not only a power hitter, a lifetime 305 hitter, 3,771 hits in his career. That's close. He's almost caught Pete Rose, which was insane, just to be able to play such a complete game. 240 stolen bases, the speed too. And I love that you mentioned that he wasn't your 90s baseball kind of juiced up, crazy muscle body kind of guy. He was a normal looking man who had incredibly fast hands and just kind of sneaky strength. That not the kind of guy you would expect to go out and hit 755 career home runs, but he was an amazing ball player. You could argue the very greatest of all time. That's perhaps a debate for another episode today. We just want to appreciate Aaron for everything that he meant to the game, and for how wonderful and how amazing of a man and of a player he was. And he will definitely be missed going forward. And Ben, it's been a lot of baseball legends who have passed away. I know we've lost a couple already at the start of this year, and several actually through 2020 as well. I know you've written about this on Back Sports page. Can you, I guess, kind of give us an overview of all that the game has lost in this short time?
Yeah, in this past year, as if this year wasn't tragic enough, I've said this before I said this about Aaron, a huge piece being taken out of baseball, but it's like there were other major pieces, or some of them arguably as big as Aaron being taken out of baseball this past year, like perhaps one of the greatest pitchers of all time. We lost Bob Gibson. So last year we lost a total of 7 Hall of Famers. In fact, it was so much to like write a full obituary feature on them at the end of the year, sadly. But these were all Hall of Famers who did like iconic things in the game. You had Bob Gibson, arguably one of the greatest pitchers of all time. But then you also lost Lou Brock, who's like one of the greatest base stealers. another great pitcher in Tom Seaver last year, Phil Niekro. Joe Morgan was the other great Hall of Famer. And then I'm just trying to remember all the names off the top of my head. Whitey Ford, and who was the seventh one that we lost last year? And Al Kaline. That's the other one, that Mr. Tiger, Al Kaline. So, I mean, he had seven alone last year. Lost it. So it's like just shows how dominant that the 60s, 50s was, because almost all these players practically like played in that era. It's crazy. It makes me think that, like, oh my God, are all the great baseball players in one era? Because, I mean, Hank Aaron's arguably the greatest hitter ever. Bob Gibson's arguably the greatest pitcher ever. And then, not to mention, this year, we just lost Tommy Lasorda a couple weeks ago. Now, Tommy Lasorda, he's perhaps the greatest manager I've ever. I mean, he's one of the great ambassadors, great voices and coaches of the game of baseball. So, I mean, it's like, I don't know how all these legends are getting lost, and it's like the game's coming crashing down in one. The game's history is coming crashing down in one these past few months. It's just become such a big tragedy for the game, as if we're not full of so many world tragedies at the moment now.
That's well said, my friend. It's certainly been a tough year in just about any way you look at it, and doesn't help to lose so many legends in such a short amount of time. And you look at those guys you're talking about. This is like the upper echelon of Hall of Famers too. Guys who had crazy great careers, and the game is missing each and every one of them in their own special way. And Aaron certainly now among that list as well. It's very sad and hard news to hear, but still, look forward to the future of the game and the youth movement, and kind of just how youth is at the forefront of it, and how there's going to be more Hall of Famers yet to come, hopefully, and just looking forward to remembering future greats in Cooperstown, along with all of those guys who we have now lost and passed away in the last year or so. But it's important to remember that we will remember those guys. They're forever immortalized in Cooperstown. We'll never forget their accomplishments and what they meant to the game. And Aaron certainly included in that as well. He has a legacy that will far outlast his time here with us on this earth. We will always remember Hank Aaron and everything he meant to baseball. I want to bring us into some of the free agent news that we had this week. And I feel like the hot stove is staying pretty hot. I mean, it's a lot of kind of minor, smaller moves coming across this week, but we did have a couple big ones. And one of the bigger fish out there in free agency, who we've been talking about some rumors for a couple episodes back now, and not really a big surprise seeing George Springer end up with the Blue Jays. We've been hearing about that all offseason. The price tag may surprise some people, though. 6 years, $150 million for George Springer, and which isn't to say he doesn't necessarily deserve it. I mean, he's been a remarkably consistent hitter for the Astros over his 7-year career there. He's only going to be 30, or he is 31 now. I guess he'll turn 32 next year. So still plenty of juice left in the tank for Springer. He hits a lot of Springer dingers, as they're called, those home runs that he's become known for. Very consistent with those as well. Plays center field, a valuable defensive position and a pretty scarce position. We're going to talk about center field as a whole a little bit later in the episode as we continue our top 10 series. I suspect this will be a name that comes up again. Ben, what was your thinking behind that the Blue Jays acquiring Springer? What was your impression of that deal?
I was actually a little bit shocked about the Blue Jays making that exact deal. I mean, on Springer of anyone for their team, because I mean, I thought they would maybe go after more of like a Trevor Bauer deal, wait and get more of like maybe a deal in an area that maybe they need to address a little more. It's not to say their pitching's bad, but like, it's just to say, like, I mean, I just feel like outfielding does not seem like they're necessarily their biggest need. I was reading an article about Bleacher Report, which pointed out that like you had Lourdes Gurriel Jr. posting a 138 OPS last year, Blue Jays outfielder. Tisque Hernandez having one of the best seasons in the game. And then Randall Gerchuk is expected to improve, and the Blue Jays are stacked in outfield. And he's expected to demand more in future seasons. So it's like they're going to have to find an odd man out now in this outfield, and the guy to be a fourth outfielder. So it shocked me a little bit seeing what the Blue Jays have in their outfield. I thought they were going to be bigger targets for someone like Real Muto or, like I was saying, Trevor Bauer. But I mean, you can't. But I mean, given that what they're given to George Springer too, it makes me wonder if like they do have a few players who are sort of in the pre-arbitration period. They're youngsters, so it puts into some question about the maintaining of that. But in terms of what you'll get from Springer, if as long as he stays healthy, I mean, it's pretty undeniable what you get from him. I mean, a lot of people, he's overshadowed by Trout with his success, but like how many leadoff guys hit like as many home runs as Springer does, or give you that much production in the field with all that? So if Springer can continue to produce, I mean, he's shown no signs of laying up either. So like there's no reason to like argue with the decision to sign Springer. I was just a little bit surprised that they went that big. So I'll agree with you there.
So yeah, maybe the Mets driving up the price tag on him a little bit too. It's kind of some speculation throughout the offseason. That was the other name we always heard in on Springer. Maybe fearing that Steve Cohen was going to outbid him with his billions upon billions of dollars. But it was a little bit odd, I guess, to see them get Springer instead of somebody like Bauer. I would agree with you that I think pitching might have been the bigger need for them. But how stacked is that lineup now, man? You got Vlad Guerrero, Bo Bichette, Kevin Biggio, George Springer, Teoscar Hernandez, Lourdes Gurriel, as you mentioned, and you got Rowdy Tellez, still pretty good hitter in his own right. Maybe probably more of a DH, but Vlad might have to DH a little bit too. I know they've been working him out at first base as well, but scary lineup for those Blue Jays. And we're going to talk a little bit too. I thought Michael Brantley was going to be joining that team as well. We had some news breaking and then unbreaking on Wednesday. I won't say where he's going to go yet. I don't want to take that whole bullet point from the show yet, but regardless, still a very scary lineup for the Blue Jays, and a team that, adding to that young core, they do have a lot of cheap young guys pre-arbitration still, like you mentioned, Ben. Kind of gives you a little more wiggle room to go out there and get you a George Springer this year, or Hyun-Jin Ryu last year, finally adding to their team in free agency. It seems like for years and years we've heard the Blue Jays are interested on this guy, they're in on this guy, but haven't been able to seal the deal, and they get it done with Springer. So maybe, I guess, getting beaten out in previous off seasons, that's part of the motivation behind what could be an overpay. But I mean, Springer has been remarkably consistent. I don't think this is like screaming bad deal or anything. If he continues to do what he has done, I think it'll end up looking pretty good for Toronto.
Without a doubt. And yeah, you said it with like the amazing pitching. How they went out and got Ryu last season. I mean, they went out and also got, I mean, don't forget that they've made a few other moves, getting Robbie Ray. They added Kirby Yates to a 1 year, $5.5 million deal. And I mean, hopefully Kirby Yates is going to be able to bounce back what kind of, we were saying, hampered him last season. And I mean, and then Tyler Chatwood too. Oh yeah, Tyler Chatwood, another pitching name. So seeing all these pitching names come up that they added for 1 year, $5.5 million deal. I mean, it's just incredible. I feel like they gave so much to Springer, but like they were able to still kind of balance the spending out on several other starters. I mean, Toronto just seems like the place that everyone's wanting to play. It's becoming really attractive, and I think Springer should especially thrive there. Rogers Center is one of the better hitting friendly ballparks. I was looking last season, it was like second in home runs there. So I just really think that the Blue Jays might be America's, I mean, I know they're Canada's team, but like close to being America's team of the future. I mean, even if not being the team quite next year.
Certainly Canada's team. There's no arguing with that being the only one left now that Montreal cleared about a little over a decade, maybe 15 years ago now. It's been a while they've been in Washington, but I love the fit with Toronto too. I think he's going to look great at the top of that lineup, and with all the sluggers behind him, I think he's going to score 1 million runs. And the end of that lineup actually probably going to end up looking as good as some middle of the lineup. So I think he'll end up driving in a lot of runs too, get some guys on base for those Springer dingers, and certainly a great ballpark for him to hit in as well. The Blue Jays do still need to find a home to play their home baseball games. It sounds like it's not going to happen in Toronto. I know travel restrictions real tight right now with the Canadian government and trying to fight the coronavirus, understandably so. Kind of a concern to have guys coming in and out of the country so frequently. We totally get that, but the Blue Jays do need to find somewhere to play. I've heard maybe a spring training facility could be in their future. I know they played at Buffalo last year, so that's been an option discussed as well. But I love that you mentioned adding Kirby Yates. I think that could be a big deal to bolster their bullpen, which was really not as bad as a lot of people thought last year. There's some upside there. They did lose Ken Giles in the offseason, but I mean, I would say possibly an upgrade if Kirby Yates is able to return to form. I know he had elbow surgery last season to remove some bone spurs or bone chips rather, but it's not Tommy John's at least. I think he's still been plenty talented these last few years. Kirby Yates has been one of the best closers in baseball. So I think the Blue Jays are really coming on strong and pushing for the title of best team in the division. I know the future is bright, but I think they could be ready to compete right now. Do you think the Blue Jays are the team to beat in the AL East, or am I leaning a little bit too far there?
Well, you said compete right now. I mean, compete right now doesn't necessarily mean being the top team in that division because, I mean, I think you got to slow down a little bit here. And we do a little bit of, I don't know, we need a little bit of a reality check when we look at like a couple of the other teams in the East. I mean, first off, who knows? I just want to even start with the team at the bottom of the East. Who knows about the Red Sox? They always have a tendency to rank good, and who knows what kind of signing they'll be getting. I mean, we know they already have some of the good. They already actually have a decent team. It just really fell apart last year. But no, putting the Red Sox aside, I mean, you still have the Rays. I still think the Rays have like the best edge with the pitching, even with I mean, maybe without Blake Snell. Oh no, I just thought of it that like they don't have Blake Snell or Charlie Morton. I mean, they did lose two pitchers, but like I think with the Rays overall have like the best edge with the bullpen. And I still think even the Yankees. I know that pitching's been seen as like a weakness for the Yankees, but just with the addition of Corey Kluber and with them still having that relatively strong bullpen intact of theirs, I actually I think the Yankees might still have that slight bullpen edge over the Blue Jays. And in terms of lineups, I actually think the Blue Jays, I know the Blue Jays are stacked 1-9, but I mean, the Yankees always are too, as we obviously see. Of course, the Yankees have had a lot of health issues in their lineups. So I certainly won't rule the Blue Jays out, but I still think the Rays are pretty god darn good. I mean, they weren't seen as being god darn good last year, and they did pretty well without like having like the most well-known names in the game. So I've always seen teams who have spent like the Blue Jays before screw it up. I'm not saying they will, but like I think I'm gonna put them maybe somewhere between like maybe the Rays and Yankees.
Yeah, I can't get mad at that. And the Rays do seem to find a way to surprise me and surprise everybody for that matter every year, where you look at their roster and on paper, it's really not all that impressive. It's a bunch of low cost kind of non-superstar guys. And I get that same impression looking at the Rays this year. And I love looking at that Jays lineup on paper. I think it's awesome, but still a young team, perhaps still some growing pains to come there. But it's where I think adding a guy like George Springer just really helps. A dude who's got as much postseason experience as anybody, one of the best hitters of all time in the postseason, something like 19 home runs in his postseason career. It is 19. I remember that from our overview sheet here. I'm not that much of a Springer fanatic that I got his stats memorized, but heck, I mean, Randy Arozarena hit almost that many alone last season, so maybe he's some postseason experience for the Rays and the Yankees for that matter as well too. And so two very strong teams still in the division, but man, if they would have gone ahead and got Brantley, I was totally ready to crown the Blue Jays. I think that lineup would have been too much to overcome, and it's still really, really good, but they do. Yeah, I think pitching is the one big concern for them, where perhaps I like the Yankees pitching better for sure. As adding Corey Kluber, I think is wonders for them. That'll help them a lot behind Garrett Cole, have a little more help. And Tampa Bay probably is going to end up surprising me in some way, so I shouldn't completely rule them out. But Blue Jays are as much in that conversation as they have been since the days of Jose Bautista and Josh Donaldson clubbing all those home runs. So it's been a little while, but the Blue Jays are back now. They are certainly back in that conversation. And moving on to our next bullet point to cover here, as we've alluded to, Michael Brantley, news breaking Wednesday that he was going to become a Toronto Blue Jay along with his outfield mate George Springer. That turned out not to be the case. He is staying put in Houston with a 2-year, $32 million contract. So the Astros kind of avoiding catastrophe. They don't lose all of their outfield. You keep Brantley there, and that's a lineup that looks pretty strong in Houston as well. Were you surprised to see Brantley staying put, Ben, or were you just kind of surprised at the way the news unfolded and then refolded and unfolded again?
Well, I was surprised that so many guys, almost all the baseball writers, like broke the same news, and that was multiple. It wasn't really even one source that was saying like, "Oh, it happened," but then, "Oh no, but then, oh, we need more of a reality check." Because I was almost like, "Yeah, there's another outfielder for that the Blue Jays signed." I was really shocked too that they were going after another outfielder. I didn't think of this at the time, but I already alluded to the fact that they do have those other 3 great outfielders, but then seeing like that, like, I mean, in some ways it was maybe understandable. I mean, that Brantley would go, because I wouldn't. I mean, him and Springer have been teammates the past few years. It seems like they've maybe developed pretty good chemistry in that Astros outfield. So I mean, I couldn't blame Brantley for also wanting to sign up the same team as Springer. But at the same time, I need a little bit of a reality check there, and I didn't think the Astros were going to totally dismantle this quickly with some of their star players, even though they still have a lot of great star players. But yeah, but I actually was maybe just as surprised at hearing that they did sign him than when I heard, "Oh no, wait a second, it's fake news. They're not signing him." Stuff. I mean, that was actually some fake news. I was like, "Oh yeah, okay." I mean, I'm not surprised. Really, it didn't come through.
I was definitely surprised the way that unfolded as well too, and I was getting ready to go out and scream from the mountaintops to anyone who would listen. The Blue Jays will be AL East champions. I think they still very well could be, but that would have been insane 1 through 9. That would have been arguably the best lineup in baseball, and you could probably still make that argument. But I really like Michael Brantley. I think he is going to help cement that Astros lineup, which is still very, very good, and kind of helps them from a demise that would have been a lot quicker than I anticipated as well. Ben Brantley, one of the best contact hitters in the game. I think it's been 5 seasons since 2014. He's hit 300 or better. He just hits and hits and hits, and he does some power, hits it for some power as well. He's got some speed and gets on base at a high rate and slugs the ball pretty well. He doesn't strike out hardly at all either. I believe I'm seeing the stat right here. It's only 10% of his plate appearances since 2014, which is insane. That's one of the best rates in baseball. So a great table setter to have in your lineup. I'm sure Houston is very happy to keep him around. Another couple moves for the Astros, certainly none as big as losing Springer or keeping Brantley, but they did go out and sign catcher Jason Castro to a 2-year, $7 million deal. Perhaps a timeshare there with Martin Maldonado. Like I said, not a huge deal, but it's good to have a backup / co-starting catcher. So important role to fill there. They also went out and added Pedro Baez to that bullpen for $2 million over. $12.5 million over 2 years. Starting to get that backwards. So the Astros making some moves and showing perhaps that they're not going away anytime soon. I think the gap is closer in the AL West than it has been. Ben, you're our resident AL West guy, though. Do you think the Astros are the team to beat in the AL West, or do your A's have anything to say about that?
Last season, my A's certainly had something to say about that. Everyone still saw the Astros as like perhaps the most dominant team in baseball going into the season. But I mean, the A's came, and obviously to the Astros' credit, they had all those injuries, but I mean, a lot of stuff didn't go great for the A's either, and they still came and said, "Move over in the West, boys." And unfortunately, the Astros, when it came to the postseason, the Astros got the last laugh as a team. I still think we got the last laugh in the AL West. As far as now, though, I think it's going to be a big upgrade for the Astros. I mean, even if it's an upgrade, though, I don't know if they're as good in the AL West because, I mean, last season they managed to do pretty impressive with all those, despite all those injuries to their starting pitching staff, despite a bullpen that was like practically all rookies last year, except for and losing one of their top, and they should be also be getting one of their top closers, Roberto Ozuna, back this next season. So hope, or I don't even remember if we re-signed with the Astros, but like,
I don't think he's signed yet. I think he's actually still a free agent.
okay, yeah, but I mean, getting Pedro Baez, I mean, it's good to add some experience to that bullpen. So I think they'll be improved on a lot of facets. I mean, I know they lost George Springer, but they're not going away anytime soon. I mean, look at the some of the young talent they still have with Alvarez, and I'm still liking. I'm not liking obviously the Astros, but they just are built for both the future and I mean the current. So I don't really see a window for them closing too much at the moment. They've been playing the cards just so well.
And you got Justin Verlander coming back at some point this year, possibly, I believe, even for the beginning of the year. I thought I heard some whispers of that. And you still got Zach Greinke. Framber Valdez stepped up for a big way for them in the starting rotation last year. And like you said, too, still all that talent on offense between Alex Bregman, Carlos Correa, Yordan Alvarez. It's going to be a great team, even without George Springer. They've got a lot of talent left there in Houston. Michael Brantley helping a lot, too, for the top of that lineup. I think they'll find a way to be successful still here too. But yeah, don't sleep on the Oakland A's, as Ben let us know. They're another team that seems to kind of always surpass expectations, just play great team baseball and perhaps unlock value from guys that other folks aren't recognizing. We see maybe that a little bit with Marcus Semien having a little bit of a cold free agent market and a guy who's been great for the A's over the last couple of years. And it doesn't sound like he's going to be returning to Oakland, right, Ben?
That's still very hard to say, actually, because going into the offseason, it looked like it was clear he'd be moving on, just like Liam Hendricks, who Liam Hendricks is moving on. But I don't know. I've heard some confidence, and I've heard some advocates with the A's advocating to keep him. And I mean, there was some question. I mean, I didn't think his value dwindled that much, even though he had a little bit of a down season last season. But I think I think there's still like that slim possibility that Semien could be staying at the A's, but it looks like this next week. I mean, he's in a lot of talks with a lot of the other teams who have potential suitors for a shortstop, and it just seems like the A's have a lot of prospect options to consider. We have quite a few shortstop prospects to consider, so but I do feel like, I mean, those guys aren't as ready. So in some ways, Semien needs to hold down that shortstop depth for us right now. I feel like in some ways it'd be smart to re-sign him than La Stella. I mean, even though I want to re-sign Tommy La Stella at second base, we actually have a little more second base depth there. It's probably going to be either one of those two that we re-sign. But yeah, I think, but like you said, I think a lot of this might not even necessarily depend on free agency and a lot of the moves we make with who will be the big competitors. I mean, the Angels could finally break through as a competitor in the AL West this year too. I think they could be definitely a dark horse. So it's going to be one of the more, I think the AL West is with the way the Astros are is kind of one of the more ambiguous divisions out there for sure.
It'll be interesting. Yeah, I could see a pathway for the Angels as well. I mean, obviously you got Mike Trout, you got Shohei Ohtani, a great two-way player as well. Still,
Rendon.
It's nice. Yeah, you got Rendon coming in last season. Perhaps still a suitor for Trevor Bauer. Maybe haven't heard a whole lot of Bauer to Angels lately, but we'll see where Bauer ends up signing. I've been hearing more Bauer to the Dodgers. I hope that doesn't end up happening. I actually heard about the Dodgers working out Marcus Semien possibly at third base as well. It would be interesting to see him moving over there, possible replacement for Justin Turner, who's still a free agent. But some moves that did happen this week, kind of more minor stuff at this point. I think we've hit most of the big ones, but Jerickson Profar staying with the San Diego Padres for a 3-year, $20 million deal. Utility man, a lot of versatility in his game. And that's an important guy for a team that intends to compete like San Diego. I think good to have a dude who can fill in a lot of different holes and kind of a well-rounded skill set. He's got some speed, got some, not a whole lot of power, but hits for pretty decent average and plays good defense all over the diamond. So good guy to have around. You see that getting the $20 million contract. Ryan Zimmerman back with the Nationals. Happy to see. It must be nice having your longtime players being able to stick around and finish their careers with their team. We'll get to that a little bit later in this list to see why I'm angry about that. Actually, it's right here on the list. Nationals adding John Lester to a 2-year, $5 million deal. John Lester, a guy who played for your Oakland A's as well, Ben. So we can both identify with that perhaps a little bit. But that made me angry that the Cubs aren't going to let John Lester ride off into the sunset and just finish his career as a Cub. He reportedly called the team after getting the deal from the Nationals and said, "Hey, I have this offer, but I want to play here. Can you guys give me 2 years, $5 million for a dude who's meant so much to the team?" That was frustrating to me. Am I out of line here, Ben, or was that weird?
I mean, I don't necessarily think so, even though it wasn't just the Cubs. I mean, it wasn't just totally the Cubs that he has played a lot of his career for and had his heroics in his career. I mean, the Red Sox fans could argue the same thing. I can't argue the same thing as an A's fan. We only had him for that one half of a year where we went all out in 2014, didn't work out, was unsuccessful. So, I mean, my only complaint about him was maybe not totally delivering for that team. But like, I'm not gonna. But like, I can totally understand why you'd be complaining about the fact that he didn't finish out his career with the Cubs, or why Red Sox fans might not like that he's not, the veteran's not finishing out the career. But then again, I mean, he might still continue to pitch these next couple of years. He could always do that thing where he signs a day with the team before he retires. A lot of athletes do that too. So it's up to you how you really want to put his sticker on free agency and where he goes as a fan. I can't exactly speak for that with John Lester.
That's a good point too, though, that probably, I mean, spent more years with the Red Sox than he did with the Cubs, but just like arguably the greatest free agent signing in the history of the Cubs, and just kind of what he meant for changing the culture of that team and sparking that run, and then in 2016 winning the big one. And just frustrating for me to see the front office not rewarding that with a $5 million contract, man. But that's another story. The Cubs are determined not to win baseball games in 2021, apparently. Bold strategy. We'll see how it pays out for them. Other deals happening this week. We see J.A. Happ getting a 1-year, $8 million contract with the Twins. Pretty good money for J.A. Happ, a veteran lefty pitcher. Gets his money. He's a good innings eater. Somebody the Yankees might miss a little bit in their rotation, but they've certainly got some other options with the addition of Corey Kluber. Other than that, we see Joe Musgrove headed to the Padres. More starting pitchers for the Padres. He might be a long reliever for them, at least to start the season, but good to have depth. And you see Joey Lucchesi, a guy who would have been in that role for the Padres, heading to the Mets. It was a 3-team deal that included the Pirates as well. But I didn't recognize the name of the guy the Pirates got, so I left him off of this list. He's probably a prospect of some sort. They probably don't intend to compete in Pittsburgh anytime soon. Other than that, Kurt Suzuki, $1.5 million on a 1-year deal to the Angels. Get a nice possible backup catcher there. He may end up starting for them, actually. I'm not really sure who else they have a catcher for the Angels. See Jose Quintana heading to the Angels, another Cub there on a 1-year, $8 million contract. Happy to see Jose getting paid. Another lefty, kind of veteran-ish guy. He's like young 30s, but never really clicked with the Cubs, but still maybe an environment change guy. See that payoff for him. Jose Martinez getting a 1-year, $1 million deal with the Mets. I think that about rounds up all the minor signings been? Are there any on that list? I know I kind of flew through it. Anything that really stuck out to you?
I mean, nothing on that list that was particularly shocking, but I think the Twins are definitely doing themselves a good service by getting yet another pitcher, because that's kind of been underrated part of the Twins. That's good, and I think that could maybe go from good to great with that signing of Hap. And I mean, yeah, like you were saying with the Padres, Joe Musgrove and getting yet another starting pitcher. I mean, they're just like so stacked with starting pitching depth. I mean, you talk about the Blue Jays might be like the great 1 through 9 lineup, but looking at pitching rotations now, I don't know. The Padres might be able to bulldoze a team, even a team like the Blue Jays, with the pitching rotation they just acquired. So it's really making it's really great. It's really great to see teams that have been pretty lackluster for a lot of time, for almost like this whole past decade, finally going for it. I'm loving and seeing all the moves like the White Sox did now, and seeing that they're finally relevant again on the South side. So, and then the Mets continuing to sign, adding yet another piece with Jose Martinez. All of this just kind of sticks out to me, just everything I'm seeing with these teams, how it's like actually I'm kind of seeing a changing of the guard with the teams that are like spending big, and changing of the guard with like the competitors in this league, which is always great to see in any sport.
Dude, we are on the same wavelength tonight, because changing of the guard was exactly how I was about to lead in with my response. I agree completely. We are seeing a changing of the guard, man. Some of the teams that haven't been that great in a while are starting to become buyers in the offseason and building young cores. And I think that's just good for the game. See the, competitive balance, and it's just good to, not be like college football where you have Alabama and Clemson in the playoff every single year. We want a little bit of variety. We want a little bit of surprise, not know who's going to be the contender every single year. And happy to see the league shifting back out, even if that means my Cubs on the downswing, whatever. It's for the good of the game. I can recognize that. I'm big enough to admit that maybe the Cubs being bad for a couple of years can be good for baseball, and certainly good for the White Sox. I'm happy to see them building a team that's going to be scary for years and years to come, and happy for the Padres too. Happy for the Mets, kind of long-suffering teams that deserve some good things happening for them. So definitely a changing of the guard. I like that perspective a lot there, Ben. We'll see if we can take each other's thoughts anywhere here for the rest of the episode, which I do think we actually may with our next segment. We're going to continue our top player series, moving to center field. We did left field last week. And truth be told, viewers, we kind of forgot about this segment until briefly before the show. So for that reason, we only have a top 5 at center field to bring to you tonight. But I think that's okay. If there was a position to do that, this is probably the right one, given that it's not a very deep position throughout baseball. It's kind of rare to find a good center fielder who plays both awesome defense and can produce at the plate as well. I know there's a lot of like defensive specialists in center field who if they're not really contributing at the plate, it's hard to put them on a top 5 list or a top 10 list for that matter. But without further ado, Ben, who do you have as the number 5 center fielder in baseball?
So that one was actually a tough one. I actually could not quite settle on that one, because like you were saying, there's not so many known center fielders that you only like really get the big names there. But I saw that you had Brandon Nemo there, Met center fielder, as a top 5. He's definitely a good choice. I was also thinking the one guy I've enjoyed the consistency of hitting is Wilt Merrifield. Was kind of my, but of course, I mean, he also played a lot of second base too, but he definitely has the top 5 qualities of a center fielder. But that was a really harder one for me to decide. What made you put Brandon Nemo as your 5th center fielder?
Well, it does seem a little bit questionable when you look at the 2019 stats, the last full year he had. It was a short season for him. He only played like a 2020 amount of games in 2019, playing 66, and pretty crappy numbers for him in that last full season. This isn't a great lead into why I think he's the best, or why he's the 5th best center fielder, but look past 2019, 2018, 2017, you see pretty strong numbers from Nemo. He had a 790 or a .797 OPS in 2017, raised it to 886 in 2018, and raised that again last year in 2020 with a shortened season with an 888 OPS. He hits for a pretty good average. He gives you a little bit of pop and gets on base at a pretty high rate. He actually had a 404 on base percentage last season. So granted, small sample size, but it was actually 404 exactly in 2018 as well. So elite anytime you're over 400 with that on base percentage. I think he plays pretty good defense as well, and not a super deep position. So that is why we're finding Nemo as number 5 on my list. Moving forward. Oh, I'm sorry, Ben.
Oh, you can go ahead. No.
I was just going to say, who might you have as number 4 on your list?
So I know that you might be thinking, yep, it says athletics bias, but I'm going to have to give it to Laureano. I mean, I know his stats were a little bit underwhelming this past year, but he was kind of the big piece of why the A's continue to be successful despite not having any top hitters last year. He just continued to show explosiveness on the field in all facets of it. And he just hits for really good power for his size while also displaying great speed and making game. I mean, he doesn't cover the most range as a center fielder, but he makes game-changing catches, which is kind of what center fielders are paid to do in the field. And he's just, and he just has a grit in him and determination to go out there that the game of baseball always really needs. So I'm just a fan of his character and everything about him. So I had to give it to him, and it certainly helps that he has one of the better center field arms in the leagues too.
And he's not afraid to fight hitting coaches for the Astros. He'll go out there and get in a brawl if he has to. He'll stick up for his guys. He's a fiery competitor. I like Laureano a lot too. He would have been just outside of my top 5 list. Probably an honorable mention at number 6. Only reason I wouldn't include him is because I owned him in fantasy last year. I was a little bit disappointed in the production, and I ended up coming in last place in my league. So that's probably more of a statement about me than about Laureano. But moving forward, I had on my list, number 4, a certain Starling Marte. Now with the he's with the Marlins. Okay, I was gonna say Diamondbacks. I forgot he got traded. Was it before last season? No, I think it was like right at the beginning of the year. I'm seeing in Baseball Reference he played 1 game with the Diamondbacks before. Oh, no, never mind. I'm sorry. I was looking at 1 game in left field. He played about half the season for the Diamondbacks before being traded to the Marlins. That sounds better. Should have done that research before the show instead of on the fly. But I like Starling Marte and that he's got power speed. Always that exciting skill set to see. Kind of looking at that through a fantasy baseball lens as well, too. A guy who can give you some home runs, give you some steals. Very free swinger, Starling Marte. He'll usually hit it for a really good batting average. It's kind of been who he is throughout his career, a 287 average. Never really takes very many walks. Is kind of a guy who just wants to go out there and hit the heck out of the ball, and I respect that. Not really great with the glove, which may be a reason to leave him out of your top 5, but again, not a super deep position. So I got Starling Marte at 4.
Well, you know what? Actually, when I was talking about contemplating my top 5, that was the other name I forgot to mention. So I was talking about Wilt Merrifield, and Nemo, but the other name I left out was Starling Marte. I think his glove kind of maybe dropped him out of it, but no, looking at his all-around hitting capabilities and everything, he's one of the most dangerous players in the game. So he's definitely top. I'd say he cracks my top 5, if not as like the closest honorable mention, because you really hit on all these parts about Marte and made me realize he is actually a great player. I might not be thinking.
Hey, that's all right, man. I think there's a lot more room for debate with the end of this list, but where it really gets pretty cut and dry is number 3, 2, 1, which, looking at our list here in the document, we both actually had the same. So we can just go ahead and trade players and go through it knowing that we were on the same wavelength again, and we did agree. So go ahead and tell the good people who we have at number 3, man.
Well, great minds certainly think alike. Great baseball minds really think alike. Even in a game that's, even though baseball's a changing game with accepting different views, great baseball minds still think alike. And certainly thought I like everything we've been saying about Springer and hyping him. Everything speaks for himself. He cracked our top 3 at number 3 with like everything he's been able to do. And I mean, if Springer was at most other positions, he'd be number 1. Like he's been that good of a player. And then number 2, I know this guy previously played left field, but Cody Bellinger of the Dodgers continues to impress with his power and some of his average too. And he could put up some good fielding stats here and there as well. I just really enjoy watching Cody. He's one of my favorite swings to watch, and he just seems always willing to grow. He's one of the most enjoyable players in my opinion. Speaking of enjoyable, the face of baseball now, if there is any sort of modern day Hank Aaron face of baseball, it's Mike Trout. I mean, I just have to say a name, and basically that speaks for itself. Oh, I forgot we're trading names. Well, all right, your turn to basically.
Nah, man, you said it perfectly. Hey, yeah, that's exactly how I would have put it too. Springer, Bellinger, Trout. That's my 3-2-1, and what a 3-2-1 that is. This is probably the best top 3 at any position in baseball, I would say. And I love, we've talked about George Springer a lot throughout this episode. You make a great point that he could be number 1 at some other positions, a great hitter. And I love the defensive versatility of Cody Bellinger. He can play some first base. He's played some right field, played some left. Mookie Betts coming in last season moved him over to center field. I was a little bit surprised to see that. I thought they may roll with Mookie in center, but he's also such a strong defensive player in right field where it does make sense to keep Mookie where he is. And Bellinger's got the athleticism, the versatility to slide over to center, and he did a pretty awesome job playing defense last year. The bat took a little bit of a step back last season, but it was a weird season, man. I'm not really holding 2020 stats against anybody, and it was only 2019 where we saw how amazing he was, arguably the very best player in baseball. Was he the 2019 NL MVP?
He was, yeah. Well, actually, I remember in 2019, despite him being the MVP, some people were a little bit skeptical because I remember he had started struggling towards the end of the season. But no, he overall earned it and stuff. So I mean, but yeah, he was the MVP. So I think he overall earned it. But I can see what you're concerned with, a little bit of his struggles there. I mean, towards the end of that season, maybe a little bit this season, but. I mean, he came up with some big moments in the postseason too, so I don't think there's too much of an issue with him, really.
I started to make a face there because I was panicking inside. I'm like, wait, was Christian Yelich the 2019 NL MVP? But I think Yelich was actually 18 then. So Yelich 18, Bellinger 19, Mookie 2020, outfielders all around, and I guess Bellinger the only center fielder there. For some reason, I was getting ready to say they're all center fielders, but they're not. But they're all outfielders. And yeah, man, we really don't even have to say anything about Mike Trout. He's Mike Trout. The numbers speak for himself. He's the best player in baseball. He is our modern day Hank Aaron. He's amazing and very deserving to be number 1 on this list. And an awesome list of top 5 center fielders that we have, if I may say so myself. But so thank you all for watching the episode. This has been Exit Velo 65. We will be actually back on the air tomorrow. Our colleague Adam Cohen is going to be bringing us an interview with a prominent baseball figure from New York. So tune in to see that. Keep reading the content on Backsports page. We appreciate you all tuning in and sticking with us here. It's always a pleasure, Ben. I appreciate you coming out to talk a little bit of baseball tonight, and it'll be next week for us, I guess, but tomorrow for the show. Come back and watch Adam. Until next time, this is Exit Velo from Backsports page.